Okay, welcome to Chapter 5 and 18 review for your test on Monday. Chapter 5 and 18 basically are biodiversity. Biodiversity, there's three types of biodiversity when we talk about diversity. There's genetic diversity, which is the different variation in genes within a population. Good genetic diversity is usually a good thing. Species diversity is basically the number of species in a given area. Habitat diversity is the variation within habitat, which makes more niches, which means you can have more species, and we'll talk about niches, but that's a big thing for niches. When we measure species or diversity like you are for your lab, you're measuring species diversity, which actually includes species richness, which is the number of species within the given area, and then species evenness, how many of each of the different species. If you have, 5 of every species in the thing that's very even, that usually increases your biodiversity when you're measuring it. Okay. Big part of the first chapter 5 is about evolution. Evolution is change within the genetics of a population over time. That is all it is, change over time. And that change can occur in multiple ways. Mutations, genetic drift, founder effect, bottleneck. You should be familiar with these. Evolution can happen at different rates. It's actually a rather quick process historically, only taking maybe about 10,000 years. Which seems like a very long time to us, but really is kind of a quick process. Some of those can lead to speciation. We'll talk about that in a minute. What else do you need to know about evolution? You should feel familiar, of course, with natural selection as well. Natural selection is basically the force that requires or is a reason why some evolution occurs. If there's no reason for evolution to occur, a lot of times it won't occur. But if there's a pressure, if there's competition, if there's predation, if there's a reason for evolution to occur, that is usually referred to as natural selection. And of course, we have artificial selection, of course, by us, to get different breeds of dogs and chickens and cows and tomatoes and stuff like that. That's artificial selection, doing basically us looking for things. Evolution leads to kind of niches. Niches, you have to know, of course, a niche is an animal's role or job in the environment. It's more than just where they live or their habitat. You have the fundamental niche that is determined by your abiotic factors. You should remember the nice little diagram of range of tolerance. This is going to be any abiotic variable down here from high to low or any kind of range. This is where they want to be. If they get out into this area, they can live, but they won't reproduce. And if they get out here way far away from their optimal range, they're going to probably die. So all these different abiotic factors and the range of tolerance leads to this fundamental niche, which would be like this big area. Okay. And that's set by abiotic. But the fact is the organism really lives in this area. And that's the realized niche, because the realized niche has also the biotic factors, the competition with other species. So this would be the realized, this would be the fundamental. So not all organisms can live where they can live based on range of tolerance. You end up with competition and other things that actually push a organism into a smaller space. And that is your biotic factors. Okay. Really, evolution and all this is important because of speciation. Speciation is the way in which we can get more species, therefore increase biodiversity. So this is the only way to increase biodiversity, is through speciation, creation of new species. I can't talk today. Allopatric speciation is through the founder effect. Okay, you basically need the founder effect to have this one. This is when a population gets split. A lot of times due to a physical factor, something splits them. A mountain range forms and splits the species and they can't cross the mountain. A river, it could be even a road. It could be anything that the animals cannot or will not cross. They refuse to cross it or can't cross it. And so then you end up with two separate populations. And over time, one of those populations or both of them can evolve differently to the point where they are finally a new species. And oh, we should probably remember what the definition of a species is. A species is a group of individuals that look the same that can reproduce. Okay, so they can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. That's the key. You have to have the reproduce and produce fertile offspring. Because remember, we can have things like tigers and lions breed because they're close enough, but they will not produce a fertile offspring. So species that are in the same area that look the same can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. The other way to get new species is polyploidy, and that's called sympatric speciation. Polyploidy is when you have more than two sets of chromosomes. Usually, I can't write sets. More than two sets of chromosomes. Usually in polyploidy, you'll have like 4 or 6 or even possibly 8 sets of chromosomes. It can be very wide. When you have polyploidy occur, the now polyploid organism cannot reproduce with the diploid. Diploid meaning 2 sets. So they become genetically unable to breed and reproduce. So that becomes a new species. So those are the 2 ways you can create new species, and that's very important to know. Not that all this isn't very important to know. Okay, so a couple things more you need to know. Of course, extinctions. We've had 5 extinctions, the 5th being the dinosaurs, and we are currently considered to be in the 6th major extinction event, and of course this is the only one caused by humans. An extinction means that you have a higher extinction rate than normal. Normal extinction rate is about 1 species in a million per year kind of thing, or per 10 million or something. So a couple hundred, 10 to 100 species a year should go extinct naturally. And when you have more than that, then that's considered an extinction event. Remember, extinction means forever. You're gone. Extirpation means that you were extinct in an area. Okay, so if our Florida panther went extinct, that's actually an extirpation. It's not a true extinction because they are the same as the mountain lions and cougars and stuff in other parts of the United States. So that would be an extirpation. Endemic animals. An endemic animal is something that is only found in one area. They are more susceptible to extinction because they're in a very small area. Usually a lot of your island species are endemic, only found in one location. Okay. Moving on. HIPCO. Hopefully you guys all remember HIPCO. These are the reasons we are losing biodiversity. These are the reasons we are currently in a mass extinction event. Habitat destruction is number 1. This is the number 1 reason. And when I put habitat destruction, I mean it can be anything. It can be habitat loss. We're reducing the size of their habitat. We're fragmenting their habitat. We're dividing it into smaller pieces using roads and stuff. We are degrading the quality of it, and we through pollution or just our interaction or being in there. If you go and you camp and you hike and stuff, it actually deteriorates the quality of that habitat for that organisms, even though you're just trying to enjoy nature. And it can affect animals. It can reduce biodiversity. It can cause animals to leave that area because they won't like it. So that is by far the number 1, because of course we are also taking a lot of land for schools and homes and all that kind of stuff. Invasive species is another big one. These are foreign species, exotic or non-native species, alien species that are introduced accidentally or intentionally into areas. The problem is they do very well. They usually outcompete the native stuff because they have no natural predators. They find food source and will outcompete the native stuff for the food source because, again, they don't have any predators, so their numbers can get quite high. They just, all the normal stuff that would keep a normal population or a native population under control, they do not have. So they just start taking over and outcompeting and eliminating species from areas. And so they're a very big danger. And we have lots of invasive species. Pollution. Pollution can kill an animal directly, like high quantities of mercury and DDT and other pollution that can get into their bodies. We see a lot of extinction happening and endangerment happening with amphibians because they're in water. And of course, if you are in water, you're more likely to absorb that water pollution. It can also be indirect in that it can degrade, the pollution could degrade the quality of their habitat and ultimately kind of go back to habitat degradation and cause that as well. Human population. Human population I throw in because it actually causes all the rest. As our human population goes up, you get more habitat degradation, you get a greater potential for invasive species being introduced, you have more pollution, more waste generated, you have more cars, so you have more climate change, and of course you need more lumber and food and stuff like that, so you have a greater chance of over harvesting. So human population kind of just leads to all the rest. Climate change. Climate change basically just means that our climates are changing, and usually because of human activity like global warming. And this actually can degrade habitats, can cause invasive species to occur. Animals just, they have a hard time moving. It's very difficult for plants to move. They move through reproduction, and if you don't reproduce very often, you are going to have huge trouble trying to, move on kind of thing. And find another location and with all the right conditions, especially if you're on an island. And then overharvesting. Overharvesting is just because, fish in the ocean are free. Anybody can go catch them kind of thing. So we're overharvesting the ocean, taking tons of fish. We overharvest our forests for timber and stuff for, burning and cooking our food. In your book, they have a picture of Haiti that's been overharvested for timber, and that's for charcoal, just so they can heat their houses and cook their food. You really can't blame them for that. So that's another one. So those are the ways in which we are causing this sixth major extinction event we are in. Those are the things that are being done or happening. Really quick, we need to save species. There's two different ways to do this. You can either try to save a species, or you can try to save an ecosystem. An ecosystem is much better to save because, of course, you're saving the entire functioning unit, and it also saves a ton of species. However, species sometimes are easier because we can use little flagship species like the panda and stuff, things that we think are cute. And it's easier to get people behind saving a species rather than an ecosystem because it kind of seems boring. Remember, when we talk about ecosystems or habitats, there's always your edge effect. Edge effect is the fact that we degrade just by proximity a lot of the edge of our habitats, and our natural parks and stuff basically are functioning as islands. So if you have this island of area, this little edge all the way around for a lot of species, and every species has a different edge effect kind of size. That's not as good a quality. So they're going to be here. And if you have hiking then that's coming in and stuff, that's going to potentially even make it smaller because they're not going to use this area too. So our activity in there really degrades their habitat. So you have to be careful. There's that whole island of biogeography that you need to look over. And if you have any other questions, because we're almost to hit 15 minutes, ask me on Monday. See you later. Bye.